right, so I gestured everything out. All right, I haven't really measured anything. I'm noticing right away that this is really wonky. There's some weird things going on with this box, but this is essentially like what I'm expecting of you. All right, so like, you know, these might not be in a horizontal, you know, alignment with each other. You guys can draw it that way, especially if you're not really good at eyeballing, because it's just gonna help you have a better composition and kind of keep your composition where it's at. But in general, you know, like I didn't really kind of see if these were lining up with each other. What I kind of want to eyeball is if right now this looks like it might be too big in comparison to that. But if I'm not looking at the still life and everything looks pretty proportional, I'm okay with that, all right? Up here, different problems, all right? This handle is massive, this is really big. This area is a little too small, so I might be able to just quickly fix some of these things. But I would spend a little bit more time on it, all right, than obviously me. I did this in like 5 minutes just so I can get the demo done. Something else, I am not a big detail person, but if you need to have like little details and nuances describing like shadow structures and stuff at first, draw them in there. If citing things out like that help you, draw in as many details as you want in the contour line drawing at first, if it's gonna help you more. One thing I would say to avoid is drawing textures, right? So don't draw any of these like textures right away, because you want, I'll show you, but basically you just wanna think about shadow structures. So if you start in like with this kind of stuff, then you might get connected to it, and then the light source is going to be all just like not accurate, but you're going to be fooled because the texture looks kind of cool, but then the light source isn't correct, and then it doesn't feel like it's actually voluminous. It just feels like it has a nice texture, so it can kind of trick you. So you want to kind of draw the things that are textured. What I do is I still draw them almost like they're like a metallic pot, not metallic, but something smooth, all right, like a bowl, right? So this is a nest, I draw it like a bowl. Also, I kind of map out my big areas of where there's wrinkles at on my drawing for the fabric. So that kind of helps me determine where those big wrinkle spaces are. Up here is a little wrong because I changed this, because I had the box mapped out wrong. So I might fix that later, but basically I kind of draw these big wrinkle areas. Again, you guys can draw them way more specific, because it might help you out, all right? I'm not, again, that kind of artist. I like drawing really, really general to specific, and I want my drawing to just kind of get the essence of what I'm capturing here, okay? So when I'm drawing, the first thing you want to think about is relativity again, right? So everything's relative to proportion and scale of one object, but now we want to think about relative values, because we have a gray paper, okay? So we kind of want to determine which gray we want the paper value to be, because we're gonna leave this paper value throughout the whole drawing, okay? So I could choose the gray of the paper to be this top value right here, and that helps me know that I'm just gonna kind of leave this top value for the most part, the gray of this paper, which tells me I have to lighten this area down here. Does that help? Does that make sense? And that tells me I have to darken this area over here. Now, if I chose the paper value to be this shadowy area over here, right, that tells me that I have to kind of lighten this spot, but I'm gonna keep this darker, and then I also have to lighten this spot. So you get to pick which area it is. So I'm just trying to pick a value that's kind of close to the value that my paper is. All right, so if you have a really, really light value, you might want to find a light value on here, okay? If you have a really, really, really dark value, the inside of this bird's nest, which is one of my darker values, might be the value of the paper. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. All right, so I think I'm going to make this top part the value of my paper, like I said before, which means this part needs to get darker. So I'm gonna relate everything to this kind of top area, right? And eventually at the end of this, all of my lines should disappear, right? But basically, I'm just gonna kind of start blocking in big shadow spaces. And there's a lot of nuance in the shadow structure right here, but I don't need to be like really crazy nuanced right away. I just wanna delineate between basically a dark and a light reference, so then everything's starting to kind of get a mass and there's a light structure throughout the entirety of my drawing. I'm gonna put my hoodie on real quick because I feel like my arms are flapping and I'm being videotaped and it's making me self-conscious, so sorry. I'm just gonna sweat it out. All right. so let me go back. So I'm just going to, and these values can change, right? I'm not stuck on them, even though we kind of are relating it to this, but if things change, it's really fluid. So I like drawing this way with the paper that we can erase, because I feel like, again, I'm a painter and it feels more like painting to me. And I just kind of keep things, you know, you can blend it out if you want, or you can keep it kind of scribbly, or keep it whatever kind of marks you're making. Sometimes, again, I change it up all the time, but I'm always moving my easel up and down. That is the one thing I'm always doing. So I'm gonna squint, and I'm just putting these bigger value areas in, and I'm just adding in darks. You also could start with erasing out lights, right? So I know that this area is gonna get a little lighter, but I'm gonna put all my lights, my darks in first, okay? And I'm not taking anything to the darkest dark or to the lightest light, all right? So even if you know something in here is white, I don't take it to white, because typically what happens is you will take something too light and it's really more of a mid-value gray. So then you have room to kind of add more values on top of it if you kind of keep it within, thinking about dark, mid, the dark that I'm adding, the light that I'm gonna add, and then this is a mid-value. And then on top of that, we'll add more darks, we'll add more lights, okay? If you really want to have something that's relativity, I might just kind of put that white there so I know how light I can go, right? But I don't typically do that. I'm just saying it's something you can do. So again, just gonna squint at this. This bird's nest has a lot of dark kind of in the middle here. It gets a little dark around this corner. Squinting again, gets dark around this corner. And it kind of connects in like that a little bit. And I'm gonna keep squinting. So I have my big dark areas, and this is kind of dark, but I'll probably eventually maybe take it a little bit lighter. Or I don't have to have as much pressure on my hand. It doesn't really matter. So just gonna keep looking. This top area, these are shadows I probably would draw in if I were you. I don't know why I didn't. But this pine cone is gonna get the cast shadows just because they're very specific shapes. So I'm just gonna map those out. This area is kind of all in shadow. So again, we only have so much time to work on this, right? We could make it really hyper realistic, but we would need way, way more time to draw it, because even just the skull itself is gonna take a lot of time to draw. So I'm squinting at it, I'm seeing that this is a little darker. There's some shadows in here. There's light sources in here too, but I'm just gonna darken the whole thing because I'll just probably erase out the light sources later. I'm gonna kind of erase away this line. Again, I did these axis lines to figure out kind of the angle of the skull and where having the eye sockets line up. And everything is the same darkness right now, but again, if I want to lighten something, I'm probably just going to soften it a bit later, because then again, now I have two different values really easily and really quickly, all right? And if I want to come back in with marks later, I can come back in with marks later, which I will, especially as I keep drawing, it will get more marked up. So I'm squinting because this skull, it has a dark on it, and it has kind of, you can look at it from this way, I don't know. It's mostly light, and then it has two really dark areas, but it has a lot of like light mid-value grays all through it, and I kind of want to just get that general structure, shadow structure of what's happening on the skull. So I'm just gonna kind of start to put a little bit of values where I'm seeing, and the only way that I can even see that this is happening is by squinting, because otherwise it's hard to differentiate. And I'm using some hatching. And I'm I'm seeing that this kind of whole side might be a little bit darker, but I also am gonna add some light, so I might not have needed to do that. I could have maybe just kept this mid value as that mid value gray, all right? Which if I'm looking at it, it is close to the mid value up here, so I probably did take that all a little too dark, but that's okay, I'll fix it later. I'm gonna make that a little darker. I'm gonna come to the top up here. Let's see. This whole section, again, I'm just squinting. Kind of has this really dark shadow. So I'm just gonna do that for now. And then this also has kind of a dark shadow. All right, looking at the pine cone, same thing, squinting at it. I'm seeing that basically this whole side is mostly dark. There's a little dark right here, and I'll put the lights in later. And I can fix the shape of all of this as I go too. So now I'm at this reflective metal pot here. The whole thing is darker than this value on the top of the table, which is the value I'm using again as my paper background tone. So that means most of this has to get darker. So I'm squinting. And just because this bottom part is black doesn't mean it's actually black, because it's actually getting hit by a light source. So it's still kind of, the black is still getting impacted by the light. This is too big. I'm not gonna fix the wonkiness right now because I don't wanna take up an hour and a half of a lecture. So for now, I'm just gonna make this dark. All right, so I kind of have darks all mapped out. You can see that it's already getting a value structure, right? Really fast. And sometimes I draw darks and lights as I go throughout the whole thing, just again, mid values. Then I use my kneaded eraser typically just because it's softer, right? So if I'm even kind of pressing, I don't really get the same white as if I do with the plastic eraser. So I like to use my kneaded eraser to keep myself controlled so I don't take anything to white. So again, this value needs to be lighter than this value, which means this whole area here needs to be lighter. And to get rid of the line, it's the two values sitting together that form the edge. So instead of me having this line that's separating these two values, the two values sitting beside each other, right, is what forms that line, that edge. All right, so the edge will disappear, the edge will come out, but the line will disappear if you just have the two values sitting next to each other. I'm looking at it, I can see that I can add more highlights on that edge, but again, I don't want to do that right now. So I'm just gonna kind of lighten this whole thing. And I just kind of keep it very vague right away in case I have to change anything. I actually prefer to, personally, I think I like to erase out a lot of my drawing and add in just tiny bits of dark. I'm doing everything opposite with this class this semester. But for me, I like to draw a lot with my eraser. So again, this back line is gonna disappear. I'm gonna come up to this pot, and now I'm kind of looking for my highlighted areas here. So that's a little lighter. This area, I don't know, I'll pull a little bit of lights out. It's kind of has a lot of linear elements to it. And then even kind of within this space, I can maybe go in between the dark and the light. I'm seeing that I have, the edge of this is lighter, not darker. So I'm gonna make that light. And again, everything's kind of in that same value right now. Like I'm just kind of keeping everything, 3 values I'm working with basically right now. And this top is way too small. but it's all lighter than the background. So I'm just gonna kind of start to pull that in, and then it gets a little darker. There's a highlight over here. There's highlights on this edge, which will come back in. And when you add the background in, this will pop a little bit more. Gonna go down.
You're at like 15 minutes, by the way.
15 minutes? Cool, thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna start kind of, again, I'm still just adding some of these highlights in, and I'm keeping it really gestural. You can make these pine cones gestural, or you can keep them very, very detailed, and I'll pull out examples. But basically a pine cone just consists of these little like wedges or triangular shapes that turn into kind of wedges as they go back. But again, I'm just kind of paying attention to that value structure, and I'll add highlights to that eventually. That will make it look more like a pine cone. I'm gonna erase out some light points on this skull. Then I'll go to the bird's nest just so we can get some texture in. Thank you for giving me the time. All right, so I'm just kind of keeping using really big tools right now. And I'm losing this line and this edging. That's okay, I'll bring it back in. I'm gonna keep some contour lines right now so I don't like completely lose the edge. But eventually I'm gonna really decipher on like, does this need to be lighter than this to create that edge value, right? But that can come a little bit later, especially whenever you're trying to draw. Like just get the gist of everything. All right, so if that's good enough, this is all still lighter. Gets a little darker over here, so I'm just gonna leave that. Give it on.
Yeah, we're back.
Thank you. All right. So I'm gonna take a step back. All right, I just wanna see kind of what I'm making. All right, it's very, very gestural, but you can still see that there's forms starting to happen. All right, so then when I'm doing the bird's nest, just because I wanted to get into some texture, we did get into a little texture up here. Typically what I do is everything with value is a lot of layering. So now I'll start going in, and again, you kind of want to pay attention to, oh, I just hit my nail on that. The structure of like the shapes and the patterning happening throughout the nest. So a lot of people will draw bird's nest like that, but oftentimes it's like angular weaving, like check marks. So just pay attention to those types of things happening. And I'll come in with the shadows, and I already kind of made the shadows a little bit more sketchy. So now I'm gonna come in and go over with I like to use the automatic eraser or one of these little, whatever, mechanical erasers. And I'm just gonna kind of repeat and overlap. Let yourself overlap some of these spaces. And I'm gonna kind of pull out my lights because I guess I didn't do my light sources yet. Might go a little over a half hour, you guys, but I'll try not to be too dramatic with it. So I'm just trying to figure out where my big areas of light will be that are kind of flat, because the other ones I'm going to add in with the texture, because I want to keep that mid value in here. I don't want to go over everything. So now I'm kind of bringing in these line patterns, and I'm going to keep overlapping the darks and the lights as I go. And I want some lines to be thicker, I want some to be thinner. Right, there's this bigger, thicker kind of line that's breaking that pattern. And you don't want to be too patterned about it, because it's not, you know, made. That's why AI looks so weird sometimes, is because it kind of picks up on patterns and then makes it too pattern. So what makes it sell as realistic is whenever you kind of disrupt that pattern just slightly, all right? And then that makes it feel more organic. Eventually we'll find those, but right now it's not. There's even some in here, but because everything in this is shadow, and I might just soften that a little bit. even the highlights in the shadow are gonna be darker than the highlights on the edges here. So you can put those textures in here, but they kind of have to stay a value or two darker than the values in the highlight areas. And I'm gonna figure out where there's this clear edge happening. I'm gonna kind of pull that out a little bit more. There's some areas that are just kind of like the mud of the bird's nest, so it's actually a little bit smoother. The whole area isn't really thick. I'm gonna pull out some thicker areas down here because I'm seeing that the line has more weight to it. Down here, same, it's kind of like getting disrupted. And then I might come in again if I think I need it with some darks. And I'm not doing this whole check line. I'm kind of starting it, but then I'm picking up. But I mean, if you make a check mark, you can just go over it again with the white. And what that does is it kind of gives that illusion of a weaving, because you're literally weaving a light, highlight, and then a dark, and then going over and breaking that highlight with a dark, and then breaking the dark with a highlight. So then it gives the illusion of the weaving, and then it gives the illusion of that kind of shadow structure that's being created within the weaving. This area, I'm gonna pull some more darks out. Does anyone have questions so far? Where are we at with time?
Like 20 minutes, I think.
20 minutes? Okay.
A little over.
Okay, cool. We have some time then. So, I'm noticing that this bird's nest needs to get darker. I could keep drawing this whole thing with my vine charcoal and make that the darkest, or I can start coming in with this block charcoal, which add even more dramatic darks. The only thing is, if you do this, you kind of have to use it throughout the whole drawing, because it's so dark that it'll start to separate if you don't kind of like evenly use it throughout the whole thing. So if you just kind of put that dark down here, you might have to bring it into some other areas, if that makes sense to you all. Fabric, let's lighten some of these areas up. Let's start pulling out some of these middle values. At the edges, they always kind of make these triangular shapes, at least how I lay the fabric. And notice that I'm leaving this mid-value gray throughout it. Up here, I didn't do it and it looks kind of weird, but there's still mid-values throughout this whole thing. This is way too sharp. I also, let's come back up to the top. Hold on, I'll get up there. So I'm just gonna start. So I feel like this whole thing is still very lacking a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail starting, but this is still just, you know, I mean, this is where you're starting to get into texture, but you saw how I kind of built that mass up first, right? This has a long, long ways to go. This has long, long ways to go. And so does the fabric. But you can start to see kind of how it's building, right? Do you guys understand kind of how I'm doing this? Now I'm gonna just pull out some mid values. So this is a value darker than the value, these highlights that I have here. And maybe I'll start pulling out some more extreme highlights too. So along this edge here, I see that there's kind of a really white highlight. This would be what I do at the end typically. And sorry, I'm trying not to block you, but I kind of need to jump over here. And I can kind of straighten this edge as I go. And then, you know, it might kind of soften in some spaces, but you can see how this isn't as light as this, right? So I still have a lot of room to work. So if I need like, if I want to pull some weird wrinkles out in this fabric, I can kind of make it look like there's these weird little wrinkles all through it. Those aren't the best way to draw a wrinkle, but it gives you the idea of what we're doing. I use the eraser as making lines as well. So if I'm using mark making throughout this whole thing, I kind of want to keep utilizing it in different areas. That being said, you know, you still want the fabric to kind of feel like fabric and the bird's nest to feel like bird's nest and this to feel kind of like a metal. So let's go up to this metal area here again. So we're gonna come in. When we're working in this really kind of dark, it's not really that dark in here, I don't know why, but dark environment with like these direct lights on this metal, it has to have basically extreme darks and extreme lights to make it feel reflective, all right? Because both of my metal objects, all of my metal objects are getting hit by direct light, or even like if it's indirect, they're reflective, right? So they're probably gonna have a highlight somewhere on top of them. So now I'm gonna come in, squinting. I'm gonna pull some darks out. Some more mid values. I think the pots are nice to kind of use smudging with some marks to kind of give it that like fingerprinted smudgy feel in some of the areas. But again, that's like a lot of detail that you don't have to put. Right? You just have to make it feel like it's a mask getting hit by a light source. I'm gonna lighten this up a little bit. So again, I go back and forth a lot between smudging to kind of make lighter values and then going back in to kind of make these darker values. This is lighter, so I want to kind of start to develop this edge. So this background is gonna get darker. So it can define my edges a little bit more. And right now I'm just kind of putting it in there like that. I can lighten it. I can do kind of like a gradient from dark to light, but I just want to start to pull out this background. This edge is also lighter than the background. Where are we at with time?
You're just about a half hour.
Just about a half hour. How do you guys feel right now? So I have to do a lot to this top. It doesn't have any value shifts on it right now, but you can see that I'm kind of just pulling out a background around it to pop it back out a little bit. And we'll just throw in the slid. But what do you guys think? Are you feel solid on how to start this and how to kind of approach all the things? I kind of hit it all a little bit, so I think we're good. Yeah. Okay. As you have